How's it going, guys? Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday to all of you. NBA regular season finished yesterday. So, right now, we're heading ready for the play in. Before the playoffs, the play in, obviously. So, if you guys are new to my channel, hit the subscribe button. If you want to learn more about NBA history and NBA basketball, just show me some love, show me some support. And because I'm an NBA encyclopedia and I know a lot about NBA history on top of my head. If you don't believe me, just ask me any questions down below afterwards. So, for the NBA playoffs, play in and Eastern Conference 2022 predictions, I'll be making a video about the Western Conference after this, a few hours, sometime tonight. So, stay tuned for that. But first, let me get to the play ins. For Tuesday, 7 p.m., the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Brooklyn Nets, the first play-in game. The Nets are an 8.5-point favorite. So after winning 4 straight, with all the injuries and COVID protocols, Kyrie Irving finally eligible to play home games as of the last several weeks. And Brooklyn's been looking strong with Kevin Durant, obviously still a beast, still one of the best players in the NBA, a phenomenal season, a 30-point-a-game scorer. And Kevin Durant, how about playing the most minutes since 2014? And even though the Nets only a 44-38 record, Brooklyn has a 36-19 record when Kevin Durant plays. So anticipate KD to make either first or second team this season. While Kyrie Irving, he's been looking inconsistent. Obviously, the long layoff, but Irving, when he's in the zone and when Kevin Durant's in the zone, both can get hot. They're very tough to beat. They're one of the best offensive teams in the league in terms of an efficiency standpoint. So the Nets with Kyrie, Steph Curry, Bruce Brown, Kevin Durant, and Andre Drummond, obviously, those are going to be the 5 starters against Cleveland. And off the bench, you got Patty Mills, who's been in the slump the last several months of the season. But if he can knock down a couple shots, will be a good X factor for Brooklyn. Nick Claxton, the backup center behind Drummond, who's a pretty young guy who's going to finish down low. Not going to too much crash the glass and get some easy looks. And LaMarcus Aldridge, who's pretty much at the tail end of his career. Aldridge, maybe he'll play 10 minutes. And Kessler, Edwards, obviously, the Nets got the final spot. They cut James Johnson, who wasn't doing anything good for the team, to be honest. And Cam Thomas, he might play 10 minutes in the playoff games. And Blake Griffin, who's pretty washed right now, I don't know if he's going to play for Brooklyn unless they're big skin and foul trouble. And if Brooklyn needs body, there's going to be all that. So I see the Nets destroying the Cleveland Cavaliers, if I'm being honest. Cleveland lost 8 of their last 11 games. Jared Allen's going to be out for the play-in. They're playing at Barclays Center, even though they got off to a really hot start. Losing Ricky Rubio pretty early in the season. And it's been all Darius Garland so far. DG has been carrying the team, and he's one of the most improved player candidates. Super exciting young talent. While Caris LeVert at the 2-guard position, he's been super inconsistent for Cleveland. He's not going to be that guy to get them over the hump. LeVert's already averaging 13.5 points for this team, and he's kind of been somewhat underwhelming and underachieving. He's been pretty good with the Pacers too, but LeVert wasn't the type of guy that would help the Pacers win games. That's why they had to break him up. So he hasn't been too effective for Cleveland. And of course, they have Okoro who's starting, Larry Marketing at the 4, who's going to knock down some shots. But who the hell's going to guard Kevin Durant if you're Cleveland? And the rookie Evan Mobley's going to be the center, so he'll be battling out with veteran Andre Drummond. Off the bench, you have Jetty Osman, who's going to play a little bit, but he's going to get cooked by KD, while Rajon Rondo as well. He's pretty old. He's 36 years old. He's going to play some minutes to back up Garland. You got Moses Brown, who's a pretty good body. Him and Nick Claxton, the 2 big men off the bench, Lamar Stevens. So with that series, I don't think it's going to be that competitive. Brooklyn is right to be an 8.5-point favorite. I see the Nets winning that game pretty decisively tomorrow, and I believe Brooklyn's going to advance to play the Boston Celtics, which I'll get to that in a little bit. So the next play-in game that's coming after on Tuesday at 9:30 approximately is going to be on TNT. The Clippers versus the Timberwolves. How about that? And many of you will probably pick the Timberwolves to win, but the season series, LAC won 3-1. No Kawhi Leonard. It doesn't seem like Kawhi's coming back this year. I mean, if he is, like, there would have been an announcement already, but it's unfortunate. Like, Kawhi Leonard, I mean, his knee injury, it was, what, 10 months ago? He got hurt in the playoffs. But how about the Clippers and Tyronn Lue doing a hell of a job? 5 straight wins to end the season. The starters, Reggie Jackson, who's been terrific under Ty Lue recently, Paul George, Marcus Morris, Nicholas Batum, who's been a solid addition. It looked like he was going to be washed like with Charlotte, but he's rejuvenated his role a little bit. Avisel Zubac. And then off the bench, you got Terrence Mann, who was able to show out last playoffs and have the game of his life. And you got Luke Kennard, who can knock down shots. How about Norman Powell? I mean, after coming back from injury, he might have been out for the season, but he's had a couple good games. Isaiah Hartenstein off the bench, Robert Covington off the bench, and you got Amir Coffey for the Clippers. The Timberwolves, Patrick Beverley's got to have his coffee game ready and be wide awake. So you got that type of loaded player, loaded roster for the Clippers. Powell and Covington. We see Robert Covington score 43 points the other day and hit 11 threes. We're like, whoa. I mean, if the Clippers can get hot, Covington, Kennard, Norman Powell, we know PG can get hot too. And Marcus Morris can knock down some shots. The Clippers have a pretty big chance in beating the Timberwolves. Let's look at the Timberwolves players. Patrick Beverley, who's really helped that team defensively with their intensity. D'Angelo Russell's figuring out how to fit in that team. Well, after a quiet first year and a half there, he's pretty good with the pick and roll, but he's been banged up a little this year. Second year sensation, number 1 pick Anthony Edwards, showing some promise and upside, but he's been very inconsistent. Edwards can score 41 game, and then other games he might go like 2 of 13. You got Jared Vanderbilt and Karl Anthony Towns. He's going to have to play phenomenal against the Clippers. Zubac can't guard him. I mean, I can see guys like Batum and Morris trying to guard Karl Towns. Cat's going to have his A game going. It's going to be him versus Paul George, the 2 best player in that play-in game. And then off the bench, you have Malik Beasley, Nas Reed, Jalen McDaniel, and Taurean Prince. I don't think he should play, but he might play a little bit. So with that said, the Clippers Timberwolves series, I'm going with the Los Angeles Clippers to knock off the Minnesota Timberwolves on Tuesday night. Yes, because Ty Lue, with his savviness, his adjustments in game, he's absolutely sensational. With the Clippers, given their experience last season, Paul George able to lead that team to the conference finals without Kawhi. Reggie Jackson against Patrick Beverley. You know the Clippers want to go at Pat Bev and try to beat him in the play-in game. I mean, Pat Bev was a Clipper for a couple seasons, but Reggie Jackson was phenomenal in the playoffs under Ty Lue. I mean, he's super confident, and he knows he's going to be able to take D'Angelo Russell. So that's going to be very exciting. Reggie Jackson has been playing with a type of confidence under Ty Lue that we haven't seen for a long time. He was very bad under Doc Rivers, but with Lue, Reggie has been a totally different player. I mean, he's so confident, doing his walk, doing his little dance before hitting game winners. I mean, that's the type of attitude Reggie Jackson has with the Clippers so far. And Isaiah Hartenstein, he's kind of a big body too that the Clippers might play. They'll play him and Zubac in and out. And I do believe that the bench players of Robert Covington and Norman Powell and even Luke Kennard can provide a spark for the Clippers. Who's going to be the bench that steps up for Minnesota? Is it going to be Malik Beasley? He's been on and off all season. I just think the Clippers with all their weapons, all the perimeter guys, and being able to shoot the 3 and the brilliant head coaching of Ty Lue, I do see the Clippers having their A game ready. So I see them knocking off the Timberwolves because the Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns has to be sensational in this game to beat the Clippers because Paul George doesn't need to have his A game going. If Norman Powell and guys like Covington and Morris and Reggie Jackson, if they're hot and knocking down a lot of threes, PG just got to play some pretty good defense. And I just believe the Clippers have more weapons against Minnesota, and unless Patrick Beverley can really make a difference there. So there I have it. I got the Timberwolves losing to the Clippers. So that's my prediction for the 2 play-in games. The next play-in game is going to be on Wednesday night. It's going to be the Hornets versus Hawks. No Gordon Hayward. Atlanta having Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, Danilo Gallinari, DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capella. Off the bench, you got Bogdanovic, Okongwu, DeLon Wright, and Timothy Lovato Cabarrone. So for the Hornets, LaMelo Ball in his second year, Terry Rozier, PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, and Mason Plumlee. So, and the bench, Cody Martin, Kelly Oubre, Montrezl Harrell, Jalen McDaniel, Isaiah Thomas, and James Bouknight, who's probably not going to play. So my X factor for that game is going to have to be Miles Bridges, who had a strong start to this season. Is he going to be able to remind us what he's made of? I mean, the Hawks, it doesn't seem like they're going to have John Collins anytime soon, and probably not playing on Wednesday. But due to the experience of Atlanta and what they've been through last season, we've seen how sensational Trae Young can be in these playoff games. Trae Young showed absolutely the highest level of confidence last season when he destroyed the Knicks, when he destroyed Ben Simmons and the Sixers, and he was able to win game one against Giannis and just destroy Jrue Holiday. Trae Young has that type of swag and attitude that I believe will propel Atlanta to beat Charlotte, because Charlotte, they don't have one of the best players in Gordon Hayward, who's one of the more experienced guys. He's got plenty of playoff experience with Utah, so I do believe it's a big loss, and I don't think LaMelo Ball in his second season's ready for the challenge against superstar Trae Young-ish, so there is that. So I have the Hawks pretty much beating the Hornets, even though Charlotte has had a pretty nice season. I just think with their inexperience and with the Hawks getting 2 series under their belt last season, I do think Trae Young's going to put on the show and really help his team advance to the other play-in. San Antonio, New Orleans. Honestly, who cares about that series? Brandon Ingram is not 100%. He's got tightness on his hamstring. I don't think whoever wins the series will matter anyway. Both teams should not have been in any playoff positioning to challenge for the postseason because they win in the mid-30s. Like Pelicans won 36 games and they have a chance to make the playoffs if they win 2. I mean, San Antonio, 34 wins and you still have a chance to make the postseason? Like, that's whack. That's really whack. I do think the Pelicans will beat the Spurs in this game because C.J. McCollum's been fantastic for them. He's been more impactful to the Pelicans franchise than all of Zion's 3 seasons with New Orleans. So I don't know if Zion's going to play. I highly doubt it. Season has been a mess for him. Can't take care of his body. But CJ has been absolutely balling, averaging around, 27 a game for New Orleans. Him and Brandon Ingram can both go off. Jonas Valanciunas, too big of a body for Jakob Poeltl and the Spurs. I see the Pelicans winning that one pretty easily. But I don't see the Pelicans beating Minnesota or the Clippers. I do think the Pelicans would have a way better chance to beat the Clippers because of the matchup and how Ingram and CJ can both ball and try to go at it with PG. But the Pelicans, I give them a really small chance if they had to play Minnesota because just Karl Anthony Towns will just shoot the 3 ball, and Patrick Beverley with his intense defense and Anthony Edwards. I just think the Timberwolves a lot better than the Pelicans in my book, but I do see New Orleans beating San Antonio, but New Orleans is going to fall to Minnesota in the second play-in, and I think they're going to get eliminated. It'll only be right if the last 2 teams to make the playoffs for the Western Conference is going to be Minnesota and the Clippers, the 7-8 seed with 46 and 42 wins. You don't want any below 500 teams to make the postseason. That would be a bad look, but the play-ins provides those types of opportunities. So there's that. For my Eastern Conference playoff matchup, so after the play-in games, it's going to be Saturday, April 16th. So 5 days from now, that'll be the official start of NBA playoff basketball. Let's talk about the 1 versus 8 matchup for the East. As I predicted Atlanta to come out of the play-ins to win those 2 games, I think they're going to beat Cleveland because obviously, as I mentioned, Cleveland, they just don't have enough, man. Jared Allen's, he's out. They're just too banged up, and they've been falling apart the second half of the season. They were hot in January. If the Cavs had their full strength, I do think they would have avoided the play-in. But with Trae Young in Atlanta and having the most experience and being the best player in those play-in games outside of the Nets, I do see the Hawks squeezing in to play Miami. While it can still be possible, Miami can play Brooklyn if Brooklyn loses to Cleveland and they win the second play-in game over Charlotte or Atlanta, or if Charlotte or Cleveland, they can possibly squeeze in and play Miami. but I highly doubt that. But if there was a scenario between Brooklyn and Miami, that matchup, I'm going with Brooklyn in 7. If they played and Brooklyn lost their first play into Cleveland and they win their second game, the lineup of Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker, Caleb Martin, and Bam Adebayo, Miami has a pretty solid team. I mean, they're loaded. Like, they have the deepest bench. Tyler Hero, six man of the year. Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, Victor Oladipo, Matt Strus, and Markieff Morris, Dwayne Dedman, absolutely loaded all cylinders. But their best player, Jimmy Butler, has been very inconsistent all year long. He's only averaging 21.5 points a game, and he's disappeared way too many times, like in half his games. Like, one night Jimmy Butler can score like 28 points, and then the next night he might only score 10 and just disappear. Like how he disappeared against Brooklyn like 3 weeks ago when Brooklyn absolutely slapped them by 30 in Miami. So that was a big blowout. I do see the Nets because Kevin Durant's the best player in that series by far, and Kyrie Irving at his best, when he's hot, he's better than Jimmy Butler when they play. Kyrie can literally elevate and score 40, 45 points, and I just don't trust Jimmy Butler as your best player. Victor Oladipo, yeah, he scored 40 in the last regular season game, but how effective can he be playing playoff basketball, being out for over a year stretch? I do see the Nets beating the Heat in 7 if that was the matchup, but realistically, if it was Atlanta versus Miami, which I do think it's going to be the Hawks, I do think that Miami will have their way over the Hawks because no John Collins. Kyle Lowry's a big physical point guard for Trae Young. He's going to try to flop and draw a lot of charges. Trae Young's going to try to flop too, so they're both two of the biggest floppers as point guards. Lowry, very physical body, and Kevin Huerter, he's just not as good as Tyler Hero. I mean, Herter's got to go off and play sensational. Hero's very good off the bench, can knock down a couple threes, will have his hands full, and DeAndre Hunter's gonna have his hands full too. I mean, he's been all right this season, but kind of under the radar and hasn't gone to like an all-star type level or anywhere close to that year. Like Hunter's nowhere near as good as Mikal Bridges of the Suns. I do believe he's gonna have a tough time that series against Jimmy Butler. And I also think that Bam, because he's so much better than Clint Capella, Bam's way more versatile. Capella's gonna have to get a lot of rebounds and box out and get buckets. And I just think Miami overall just has way better weapons. Their three-point shooting of Duncan Robinson and Hero and Strus too, all those other guys, and just being too deep. I do think that Miami would beat Atlanta, I would say, in a 6-game series, 4-2. I do think Trae Young can have some 40-point games to help Atlanta win, but with no John Collins, I just don't see them beating a loaded Heat team. I do think that there's going to be games that Trae Young's not going to shoot as well because you got defenders like PJ Tucker and Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler. It's just too much of a matchup for Atlanta and Trae Young to overcome. I don't see them beating Miami, so I have the Heat advancing to the semis. So let's talk about the 2nd versus 7 matchup. Very much likely, if Brooklyn gets past Cleveland, they'll play the Boston Celtics. That would be the most exciting first-round series, in my opinion. You got Kevin Durant and Jason Tatum, arguably two of the best small forwards in the game right now. The lineup of Irving, Curry, Bruce Brown, and Durant with Drummond starting. While the Boston Celtics has been one of the hottest teams in the second half of the season, after starting 18-21, Boston has gotten 32-10 since that meeting. Since the player had their own private meetings, they've been able to really figure out and establish an identity that was missing for a year and a half. And that starts with Defensive Player of the Year candidate Marcus Smart, who's going to really set the tone. He's been sensational. He's going to make defensive first team, and he's improved both offensively and defensively with his tenacity and his playmaking, his ability to also knock down threes at times. Boston's going to need Smart to really step up, while Jaylen Brown, too, has been pretty steady this season. He was an all-star last season, his first. He's a 22-point-a-game scorer or 24, but GB's going to have to play sensational I mean, he's pretty good. While Jason Tatum, he can score the heck out of the ball. We see Jason Tatum score for 45 and 50 points. He even had a 60-point game. He's one of the best scorers in the NBA at 19 years old. So JT and KD, that's a sensational matchup. Two of the best scoring small forwards in the game going at it. How about getting Daniel Tice and Al Horford back? Those two guys absolutely successful under Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens, as a GM, knows those guys very well. And Ime Udoka's been able to utilize all his guys, having that Celtic culture established. So they're a pretty tough team. And even getting guys like Derek White, they got rid of Dennis Schroeder, and I believe they got rid of a pick to get a guy like Derek White off the bench. Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, and Aaron Nesmith. It's going to be an exciting, super close series. Obviously, Boston has way more chemistry than Brooklyn, but in terms of talent and ability to knock down shots, and guys, you have multiple guys that can drop 50 in a playoff game and knock down clutch shots. It's going to be super exciting. Boston having home court advantage, I do believe can play a strong factor into it. But with Robert Williams missing probably most of the first round series, depending how quickly he will heal, that's a big blow to the Boston Celtics. It's a really big blow. So Al Horford and Daniel Tice, they're not really great rebounders compared to Andre Drummond. Brooklyn's going to need Andre Drummond this series. And given last season, Brooklyn beat Boston in 5 games, but Boston obviously wasn't healthy, and Brooklyn was healthy with Harden and Kyrie and KD playing together. That was easy for Brooklyn, and it'll be a competitive series, a team with chemistry that's younger, not as talented, against Brooklyn, just super talented. But I do think that with Brooklyn, that having Seth Curry being able to play and Bruce Brown and having some of the guys back, even though I don't think Ben Simmons will play, I'm going with the Brooklyn Nets beating the Boston Celtics in 7 games at Boston Garden. I do think that Kyrie Irving has something to show, has something to prove. After sacrificing a lot of his money for his personal choice not to take the vaccine, Kyrie Irving needs to prove something. If he was really going to sit out for so long this season, he's going to have to play hard and prove what he's made of in the postseason. The team better not mess up. And I think Kyrie does understand that. He has cost the Nets a lot of games because of his personal reasons. Kyrie Irving's going to have to show out. And we've seen how he played and dominates in playoff games, especially on the road in Game 7s. Look back at the 2016 finals. Kyrie Irving can absolutely ball out when he's ready. And Kevin Durant, he's the best player in the Eastern Conference for 1 game if you need him for the playoffs. If it goes 7 games, I just don't see the greatness of Kevin Durant losing to a guy like Jason Tatum, who's also inching to be a top 10 player. But I still think there's like a pretty wide gap between KD and JT. Kevin Durant is just clearly better than Jason Tatum still in 2022 at this point. So I see Brooklyn winning Game 7 on the road against Boston. I think it will be a super competitive series. I do think that Boston in the first couple of games, because of their chemistry, and Brooklyn still looking for their identity, Brooklyn will be shaky for a bit, but I do think that the toughness and the experience and the greatness of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving can both overcome the Boston Celtics. A lot of you guys might have Boston beating Brooklyn. I think that's a really big toss-up because Brooklyn doesn't have their chemistry. I just think the talents of Kevin Durant, you just can't count him out in the first round. Like, can you imagine Kevin Durant and Kyrie, even if they don't have like their best player and Ben Simmons is not going to play, they still should be good enough to beat teams like Boston, which is why I'm going with the Nets. So there I have it. I have Brooklyn. Would it even be an upset if Brooklyn was able to beat Boston? I don't think it'd be that much of an upset at all because Kevin Durant is so fucking good in basketball. Like, it's almost scary. Like, he's a cheat code. And the last couple of playoffs when he's healthy, Kevin Durant absolutely balls out. You can't say the same for Jaylen Brown. And I do think that KD will get the best of Jason Tatum without Robert Williams. I just think the Nets, they're going to beat Boston in 7 games. So there's that. So the 3 vs. 6 matchups, I don't blame Milwaukee for avoiding Brooklyn in the first round, honestly, because it's not a guaranteed win for Milwaukee. Even though I do think that the Bucks are better than the Nets right now, they have the chemistry going. Their big 3 is healthy of Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday. And why wouldn't if you were Milwaukee, why wouldn't you want to lose the last game of the regular season to play the banged up Chicago Bulls? The Bulls, DeMar DeRozan had his great run. He's probably going to make all NBA team this season, maybe even second team. But Chicago can't beat any good teams. They're just not legit. They lose to teams like Philly, they lose to Miami, and they lost to Milwaukee. I don't think they won any of those single games this year. And because with the loss of Lonzo Ball, too, who was a pretty good defender, and he could do a lot as a role player. The starters of Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and Vucevic. I just don't think it's enough for Drew Holiday, who's a better defender and a better player than Caruso. Grayson Allen, who the Bulls really despise. But Grayson Allen's been proven to provide a spark and knock down a couple threes and play hard for the Milwaukee Bucks, even though he's one of the most disliked players. Chris Middleton's going to be Chris Middleton. And Giannis, obviously, the regaining Finals MVP. He's probably going to win DPOY as well. Giannis, like, he's arguably the best player in the game. I just don't see him losing to DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. I mean, Giannis can eat those guys for lunch, and I just think he's too dominant at this point. Brook Lopez, he's also going to probably start. I mean, he came back over the last month of the season. He played like 13 games, but Lopez, he can also stretch the floor, kind of like Vucevic too. And Vucevic, he hasn't been as good as previous years. I do think Vucevic is a little past his prime. And the Bulls with Kobe White and Tristan Thompson off the bench, I just don't think those guys will be impactful enough to really beat Milwaukee. And the Bucks also have Bobby Portis, a 14-point scorer off the bench, who's been fantastic. He's had high level of confidence since that NBA Finals. Pat Connaughton, guys like Wesley Matthews, absolutely scrappy. They know what it takes to win. George Hill off the bench and Serge Ibaka as well. I just see the Bucks beating the Bulls in an easy 5-game series. Like, I'm sorry, Bulls fans. I mean, DeMar DeRozan, he's had a great regular season, but playoff DeRozan just hasn't been as good. And I see Milwaukee and Giannis just shitting on the Bulls just all series. Milwaukee can even sweep them. I can even see that. The Bulls just don't beat any good teams. So I have that. That's probably the easiest series to predict. Now for my 4-5 matchup. How about this? Very interesting stuff. The 76ers and the Toronto Raptors. Wow, the Raptors, the 3-1 season series lead, a win over Philly. And you see the last 2 games, Joel Embiid has had trouble against Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse has been absolutely brilliant against Embiid. So let's take a look at the Sixers starters. James Harden, who's been playing terrible lately, his hamstring appears to still be bothering him, but there's no excuses for that. Like, if James Harden's hamstring is still messing up, I mean, that was over a year ago. What the hell has he been doing this offseason? Why is he still playing like crap? Like, James Harden just doesn't seem to have that type of explosiveness anymore. Is he still partying at the strip clubs, drinking maybe 20 shots of alcohols? If James Harden's still doing that, he's got to tone it down because he's still missing an NBA championship, and that's what's most important to him. Tyrese Maxey has been sensational. Sometimes Maxey looks like the second best player on the team, even with Harden, and he's in his second year. Danny Green, he's a great 3-and-D guy. I mean, Danny Green can either get hot or either get cold. We've seen Danny Green brick a lot of shots in the playoffs, especially 2019 and 2020 when he won those rings. Danny Green has had some horrendous stretches, eating cheese sticks in strip clubs. So, I mean, Tobias Harris too. Is Tobias Harris going to show up $150 million a year? No, Tobias Harris, what was his contract? Like 5 years, 150. So he's making around $30 million a year. Is the 2 years ago pandemic Harris going to show up against the Celtics where he was terrible? Or is a 20-point a game Tobias Harris going to show up? Which one is it going to be? I mean, he's like 31 years old. He's not going to get any better. I mean, Tobias Harris is who he is at this point. You don't expect him to go off and do too much. He's not good enough as a second option, but he needs to ball out against the Raptors. He needs to hit shots. And Joel Embiid, he's been sensational. I do think that Embiid's going to go off this series because he's been playing like a man possessed. I do think that he's going to need a lot of help because if Embiid's the only guy that's cooking for Philly against the Raptors' loaded squad, I mean, Toronto don't have a superstar. Their best player is either Pascal Siakam or Fred VanVleet, but they have a lot of guys who know how to play together. They have an identity under Nick Nurse, and they also have the confidence, which I don't see the confidence from the Sixers and Matisse Thybulle. not eligible to play in Toronto, no road games because apparently he doesn't have his second dose of the COVID vaccine. I believe he took his first dose, but he's missing a second shot, so he's not eligible, which is just so ridiculous and really unfortunate situation for the Sixers. For one of their best defensive players to not travel to Toronto, I think that's going to have some impact in the series. Let's look at the Raptors. Fred VanVleet, a 20-point scorer, all-star this season. Gary Trent Jr. has been absolutely sensational too. That was a nice pickup for them. Scotty Barnes, who's going to be one of the front runners for Rookie of the Year. He's going to finish either 1 or 2. He's absolutely sensational as well. Pascal Siakam has been playing legit. I can see Siakam making third team All NBA, perhaps even edging LeBron because he's been averaging 23 games this season. His passing has been great, and he was destroying Embiid last week. Oh man, he was taking it right at him. Cam Birch as well. And off the bench, you got Thaddeus Young, Chris Boucher. Precious Achiuwa was locking up James Harden. And then OG Anunoby is not 100%. He's only played a couple games since the All-Star break, but he would be absolutely a big help for the Raptors if he's able to play. That will be an insane series. It really would be an insane series too. I had to think about this really for a really long time, but you got Joel Embiid, who's playing like a top 3 player this season. And Joel Embiid, like he was destroying teams like the Pacers. He's scoring 40 plus consistently. And I do think that James Harden, he knows what this is about. James Harden, out of any player, has the most pressure in the playoffs to get out of the first round. He needs to get his shit together and figure this out. And against a Toronto Raptor team where Pascal Siakam, he's probably like a top 20, top 25 player in the league. Fred VanVleet, probably a top 30 player. And if Joel Embiid loses to a guy like Pascal Siakam, who's the best player on that team, who's a top 20, who's not even a top 20 player-ish for that series, I could see the Raptors beating the Sixers for sure. I mean, if James Harden is playing the way how James Harden is playing right now, I see the Raptors taking out the Sixers in 6, but Harden needs to really figure this out. And I do think that Toronto will win a lot of their home games because, like, Matisse Thybulle, the Sixers' best perimeter defender, I mean, he would be a perfect guy to go guard, like, from Siakam to VanVleet. I mean, is James Harden going to get his legs together, or is he just going to get abused by Siakam, or is he's going to get abused by Gary Trent and even Scotty Barnes too? I mean, if James Harden is not 100% and he looks vulnerable, I do see that the Toronto Raptors can win this series in 6 games. But with all that said, knowing that Doc Rivers, I mean, his job is on the line, and James Harden has gotten a lot of backlash this season for leaving the Nets, and rightfully so. And he knows that Joel Embiid's going to be the guy that's going to score a lot of points, but only because of Joel Embiid's like pure will. I do see the Philadelphia 76ers beating the Toronto Raptors in 7 games. Yes, I got it in 7 games. I'm going with Philly. I can't bet against Embiid. After what I've seen this season, I do believe that Joel's going to figure this out. I don't think he forgets about what happened like 2-3 seasons ago. Kawhi Leonard, the game-winning shot in Toronto in the playoffs, which left Joel Embiid to tears. So Joel Embiid has had many flashbacks and nightmares about what happened in Canada. So I do see Joel Embiid in one of those games against the Raptors in a must-win. I can see Embiid just totally going off for 45 points, knowing what the environment is like. He's going to have Drake hounding him all series long. Embiid, I do think that he's going to take it personally. Joel's on a mission this year. I just see that Joel playing sensational. So I do see Embiid getting past the Toronto Raptors. I don't see James Harden playing as well. I see James Harden, he's going to have to play some defense and come up with some good plays, like how he was terrible offensively in Game 7 against Luke Dort and OKC in the bubble. I do think that James Harden's going to have some of those types of games. He's going to have to grind out. It's going to have to be a collective effort for Philly. I don't know if that will happen, but I do trust Joel Embiid a lot. I think he has a lot to prove this season, and only because of Joel Embiid's greatness, I see the Sixers beating the Raptors in 7 games, but I won't be shocked if the Raptors even beat the Sixers in 6. This is honestly a toss-up series. Joel Embiid needs to play well for for the Philly to win. And I do believe the process is going to have some of his best moments this coming series. We're going to truly know what Joel Embiid is made of after this Toronto series. I mean, because if he loses in the first round, he's going to be left off the conversation with the Jokic's and Giannis of the world. But Joel Embiid is still a mystery in the playoffs. I mean, Jokic has been pretty established all postseason. His efficiency still carries with his game. Joel Embiid's going to have to just dominate. He better make sure he gets all those foul calls and get the Raptors in foul trouble. Is Joel Embiid going to get those calls? We'll find out. We'll really find out. On the road, it's going to be a lot tougher, but the Sixers at home, they can't lose those games. Tobias Harris, $150 million man, he's got to do it this series. And Tyrese Maxey, he's got to be an X factor too. I'd love to see him and Gary Trent go at it, but ultimately, because of Embiid, I have the Sixers winning in 7 games in a very nail-biting series. That's going to be one of the most exciting series. The Raptors, Sixers, and the Celtics. So there I have it. So for the semifinals, I got Miami versus Philly. With that, like I just think that James Harden, even if he gets it past the first round, I just don't trust him this season enough. And he shit the bed so many times in past playoffs that with his Houston days, I see James Harden just getting locked up by Miami, the PJ Tuckers of the world, the Jimmy Butlers. Harden's going to have a very difficult time. He hasn't looked right all season. If he gets past the first round because Embiid's carrying him, I could absolutely see him playing terrible against Miami. And Joel Embiid's going to have his hands full too because Bam Adebayo's a pretty good defensive player as well. So Embiid, he's going to have to do a lot against the Heat team. And the Heat have Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, those guys. I don't find Miami that legit, but I just don't see the Sixers getting past the Miami Heat if they get past the Raptors, because Doc Rivers, the king of 3-1 shivers, always chokes in the second round. That's been his reputation, and I think the Sixers will lose again this time in the second round. So I don't see Philly getting past the second round as great as Joel Embiid is. I just don't trust James Harden in the playoffs. He's looked terrible this regular season. And unless Harden has a miracle during the Visky 2011 run, I just don't see that coming because a lot of his game is predicated on drawing fouls. And I think Miami's going to get extremely physical with Harden, and Harden's going to have a lot of turnovers. I do believe that Kyle Lowry's going to get under his skin. So I don't see James Harden or the Philadelphia 76ers beating the Miami Heat. So I got the Heat winning that one. So for the semis, in case you guys missed the beginning of my video, I have the Nets beating the Celtics in 7 games because Robert Williams, he's going to miss probably all that series. He was a big loss for Boston. He was the best defensive big man. So the Nets-Bucks, a rematch of last year's semis. Last year's series arguably decided the championship, but who knows about Ben Simmons? Like, what the hell is wrong with Ben Simmons' back? Like, he's hurt, but all of a sudden, his team's posting videos of, oh, Ben Simmons is working out. Oh, he's doing his cardio. Oh, he's doing that treadmill run. Like, who cares? I heard Ben Simmons didn't even play 3-on-3 yet, so I don't expect him to come back for the playoffs anyway. I don't think Ben Simmons has thick enough skin to really try to make an impact and play right away after shitting the bed last playoffs. I mean, has he even practiced ball? Like, how the hell does he have the back injury? So I don't see Ben Simmons doing that. I don't see him having the guts to sit out all season and then all of a sudden guard Giannis Antetokounmpo. I just don't see that. But because of the greatness with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I mean, Kyrie got hurt last season in Game 4 when Giannis stepped on his foot. That was an unfortunate injury for Brooklyn. But after seeing how great Kevin Durant is against Milwaukee and even against Giannis too, KD knows that he's going to have a Jordan-esque performance against the Bucks. I just don't see the Nets beating Milwaukee because Milwaukee have their size. They have got the bigs of Lopez, Ibaka, and Giannis. I just don't see Brooklyn having good enough defense, especially if Ben Simmons is not going to play. I mean, the guys like Seth Curry, Patty Mills, and Kyrie, they're just too small for like Drew Holiday. And Chris Middleton's also another guy that can get hot and score 30 and 40 points as we've seen last postseason. So having a guy like Middleton, I mean, Bruce Brown's got to have to play like insanely good defense for the Nets to beat the Bucks. I just don't see Brooklyn's defense or having the size to contain Milwaukee. And Giannis is just gonna foul out everybody on Brooklyn. He's gonna take Andre Drummond out the game. He's too big for Nick Claxton, and he'll destroy a washed-up Blake Griffin. And LaMarcus Aldridge is a fossil who can't guard anybody on the Bucks. So I see the Bucks beating the Nets in 7 games. I think Kevin Durant's going to do a very good job, and Kyrie, they're going to have their moments, and they're going to keep this series competitive. But I just think a 33-year-old Kevin Durant's going to be too drained by the time there's a Game 7 against a 27-year-old Giannis. Giannis, best two-way player in the game. I just don't see the Nets without like a Ben Simmons type player just overcoming a Milwaukee team who's physical, who's tough. You got guys like Drew Holiday who can really hold his ground and really lock down smaller guys, as we've seen how he was able to drain Chris Paul. I do think that Kyrie Irving not playing a full season, if this series goes the distance against a defending champion Bucks team, I do think Kyrie can get drained too, just because of Drew Holiday's overwhelming physicality. Chris Middleton's going to be a handful. Bobby Portis at 6'10", I do think he's going to be a handful too for Brooklyn. And I just don't see the Nets, given their small amount of time, their lack of chemistry, too many question marks for Brooklyn. I just don't see them beating the defending champions in the Bucks. So I have the Bucks winning that one in 7 games. But I won't be shocked if Brooklyn wins if Kevin Durant just goes all out, because Kevin Durant's an amazing player. And man, I mean, this should be a conference finals matchup if we're being honest right now. I would have loved to see the Nets play the Sixers, but it doesn't look like this is going to happen. The Sixers will probably lose before Brooklyn anyway. So that's my prediction. So in a conference finals matchup, I got Philly losing to Miami, and I have the Bucks against the Heat in the conference finals matchup. I'm going with the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, they destroyed Miami last season after the bubble year. The reason why the Bucks lost in the bubble, because they weren't built for the bubble. Miami was a team that was perfectly meshed and built for the bubble. And the Bucks also had Eric No-Show Bledsoe in the bubble, who always disappoints and chokes every playoffs. And compare him to Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday's way better than Bledsoe in the postseason. So with Holiday last season, and Bryn Forbes even outscored Jimmy Butler that series. Giannis was taking a dump on Jimmy Butler and the Heat all series long. Last year was humiliating. The Bucks destroyed the Heat, and I do see the Bucks beating the Heat in the conference finals matchup 4-1. I think Brooklyn's going to be the toughest matchup for Milwaukee, to be honest, because Kevin Durant and Giannis can match up with each other. They're arguably 2 of the best players in the NBA, so going at it. So they kind of cancel each other out in terms of greatness. Jimmy Butler being the best player, he's nowhere near as good as Giannis. And I can also see a guy like Chris Middleton outplaying Jimmy Butler. I mean, Chris Middleton was sensational in the playoffs, while last year Jimmy Butler was like, oh, I'm stupidly locked in. He got swept, outscored by Bryn Forbes. That's how stupidly locked in Jimmy Butler was. And I just think with the Heat's hostility this season, being super inconsistent, getting into a fight with Spoelstra, Udonis Haslem just saying that, oh, you ain't gonna do this shit. So Jimmy Butler, I just think he's too inconsistent and he disappears way too many times. I think Drew Holiday's gonna do some good defense, and I think Jimmy Butler might lose his cool against Grayson Allen, who might do some dirty things. So I just think Milwaukee, because of Giannis in the prime of his career, I don't see Jimmy Butler at 32 years old beating prime Giannis. I don't see Bam Adebayo. He's missed way too many games this season. I don't think he has an answer for Giannis. I mean, Milwaukee has every position loaded. They have a good bench. They have good big men. I mean, just look at the length of Brook Lopez, Ibaka, and Giannis. They're a really big team. And Bobby Portis as a stretch 5 who can knock down threes. He's a much improved shooter too. And I just think Milwaukee has too much weapons. And Miami's got to really how to figure out how they can slow down Giannis. I just don't think they could do it anymore. Giannis has gotten too good at this point. This is why I have the Milwaukee Bucks coming out of the Eastern Conference. So there is that. I'll make a Western Conference video in a little bit, so I'll stay here for a couple minutes. So I'm going to answer some Q&A and just growing up the chat. I thank you guys for joining here with me. Really appreciate your support. So good to see some familiar names, my familiar fans. Shout out to all of you, Kenny Allen and Julian Garcia. Julian has the Nets beating the Cavs and the Hawks beating the Hornets. Yep, I mentioned that earlier. Yep, I totally agree with that. Clippers are deep, but no superstar. Yeah, they're deep, and Ty Lue is a hell of a coach. That's why I got them beating the Timberwolves in the play-in game for one game against Ty Lue. I just think Minnesota, they haven't been to the playoffs in a long time, and last time Karl Anthony Towns was in the playoffs, he played terrible, but he has a chance to redeem himself. I just think the Clippers, I mean, they're in familiar territory. They dealt with a lot of adversity before. Who had a better prime, John Wall or Bradley Beal? I'm going with Bradley Beal. I mean, where's John Wall been these days? John Wall, is he even going to be an NBA player in 2 years? I mean, it looks like he might be out the league soon after his fat contract expires. Nikola Jokic for MVP, and Embiid is great. He has a scoring title, but Jokic can bring the ball down the court. He can pass, facilitate, play defense, and run the offense. I do think Jokic is MVP as well. I do think that he's going to beat out Embiid and Giannis in my book. Thank you for your support. I think Boston beats Nets in 6. Possibly, possibly. But Kyrie and Kevin Durant, I trust both of them to play well in the playoffs. They're one of the most talented players we ever seen. You think Kyrie gained back deserved respect from all the fans due to his recent performances because he was deemed part-time? If Kyrie's able to beat the Celtics and help the Nets advance far and just play incredible in the postseason, his regular season stuff's going to be forgiven. But if Kyrie shits the bed in the first round, he's going to have it, and you better believe that. So it's going to be miss or break for Kyrie, in my opinion. Break or make, I mean. Harden at the club. I was shocked that James Harden. I was shocked that he wanted to leave the Nets so early because right when he was traded to Brooklyn, like like the Brooklyn Nets practice facility, they're in Brooklyn, like an industrial area, a super quiet place, and there's a strip club literally a block away from Brooklyn Nets practice facility. That was my first thought about James Harden when he went to the Brooklyn. The strip club's literally a block away. I've been to that strip club a couple of times in the past. It's all right. I don't trust Doc Rivers. I don't trust Harden. Embiid does have health issues. I mean, yeah, the Sixers, they can either lose in the first round to the Raptors in 6, or they can advance to the conference finals. But I just don't see Philly beating Miami. I don't see them beating Brooklyn. I definitely don't see them beating Milwaukee because Milwaukee has the body and size and physicality to match up with Joel Embiid. And Drew Holiday, he plays pretty good defense against James Harden. James Harden just doesn't have that explosiveness anymore. And I think like Chris Middleton, at this point, he's going to be hunting for Harden, who's been a liability on defense. Like James Harden, there's a lot of pressure on him this season. Kevin Durant is a top 3 scorer, period, all time. He is one of the most gifted scorers of all time. I do say Kevin Durant. He's incredible, man. Like KD is so good. Like, he is an unbelievable talent. James Harden, I didn't sign up to have any starting players physically disappearing during the playoffs. James Harden's really got to prove himself this season. There's a lot of pressure on him, like getting out of Houston, getting out of Brooklyn, now playing with Embiid. He's got a lot to prove. I respect, but Nets in 6 or 7. I don't trust Middleton. Too inconsistent, and Holiday too. Okay, that's a fair point to say. Middleton and Holiday has been inconsistent even last season. In the finals, Drew did a great job on defense against CP3, but there were games in which he just couldn't hit a shot. He goes like 5 of like 20 or 4 of 19. Just disgusting shooting performances, but because of how good Giannis is, the Bucks were still able to win. That just shows how far Giannis has come along. Harden and Curry is a disastrous backcourt. I mean, I think you're talking about Kyrie and Curry. I mean, on defense, they're disastrous, though. Bruce Brown's got to make up a lot of ground. So there's that. 8.5 points favorite for the Nets is a good bet for the Cavs. I think Brooklyn beats them pretty easily. Joker has less MVP help. Beal has the better prime, but Wall has been the better player. Who wants John Wall on their team these days? Contract extension, 40 games in the last 3 years. For what? Number one pick for what? John Wall? Give me a break. Nah, John Wall, he's in the downside of his career. I'd be shocked if he even becomes an all-star again. His days are long gone, in my opinion. The East won't have a Hawks type team. No way, not this year. The top teams are just too good. I highly agree. The West could have a team like the Mavericks or even the Clippers. If Luka Doncic gets healthy, we're awaiting to see on Luka's status. Once we get more information on Luka's status, that's when I'll make my Western Conference prediction video. I might have it late tonight after 11:30 p.m. on the East Coast, or I'll do it tomorrow morning. I think the Mavs go to the finals, then play the Nets. Hell no. Hell no. No, no chance. As great as Luka is, there's too many good teams in the West. Once again, I'll get to my Western Conference video pretty soon, but we'll have to wait a couple hours after this. Harden hasn't been bad in the playoffs, though. He's been underachieved without a doubt. I mean, elimination games. I mean, isn't that where your legacy is supposed to be built, in those types of elimination games? Look at the elimination games for Brooklyn last season. I mean, Game 7, like Harden, he tried to play through his hamstring, but he played terrible, and he played 45 minutes that game. I also hope the Bucks could beat the Nets as well. I think they will. I think they'll beat them in the second round. If the Celtics was able to beat the Nets in round one, I think the Bucks will easily steamroll the Celtics. I mean, Robert Williams not 100%. Giannis will just destroy Boston. He destroyed them like 2 years ago, or 2019. I mean, Giannis absolutely destroyed them, and he destroyed them with his starting point guard Eric Bledsoe. So Drew Holiday on that team, way bigger upgrade. So there's that. Yep, I agree with you, Ron. I think Phoenix is too good, but I'll get with that Western Conference video in a little bit. So last night I made an award predictions video, and I gave my takes on who's gonna win MVP, who's gonna make first, second, and third team. So if you guys haven't seen it yet and have some time, definitely recommend you to check it out. I do believe my predictions will be pretty accurate, but we'll see. We'll see. So lastly, in case you guys missed the beginning of this video, I have the Milwaukee Bucks coming out of the Eastern Conference. And with that said, I'm going to head out right now. So I thank you guys so much for tuning in. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Once again, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you next time. Peace.